Here is your deeply emotional, cinematic story written exactly in long, plain, flowing narration paragraphs, perfect for YouTube narration, with both engagement prompts placed exactly where required. Single dad's 50-year-old neighbor said it so calmly, "If you want to look, just ask." I froze. The first time it happened, I was standing in my dim, cluttered kitchen, still half drenched from the sudden rain that had chased me home from my night shift. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight I'd been carrying for months, bills piling up on the counter, my 7-year-old son asleep in the next room after another night of fevers, and the exhaustion that had carved itself into my bones like something permanent. I had leaned against the counter just to steady myself when I noticed her through the open blinds, my next-door neighbor, the 50-year-old widow who moved with a strange calmness, like life had already thrown everything at her and she had somehow learned to walk through storms without bending. She stood on her porch in the fading streetlight, drying her silver-streaked hair with a towel, and for a second, I just watched. Not intentionally. Not in any way I should have. Just long enough to forget life for a moment. Long enough to remember I was still human. Until she looked up and caught my eyes through the rain-smeared glass. And that was when she said it, soft, steady, terrifyingly calm. "If you want to look, just ask." I froze. Completely. If you're watching this and believe every story hides a lesson, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Humanity Stories. Your support helps these stories reach the world. I remember pulling back like I'd been burned, my heart punching against my ribs, my breathing all wrong. Shame flooded me so fast I had to grip the counter again, and for a long moment I couldn't move at all. I kept replaying the past few seconds, trying to understand whether she was angry, mocking, curious, or something else entirely. But her voice, that calm tone, felt heavier than any interpretation I tried to give it. The next morning, the world was washed clean from the night's rain, but my mind felt dirtier than ever. I tried to avoid her house as I carried the trash out, but she was already outside tending to the small row of plants she kept, wearing a loose gray sweater and an ease I couldn't match if I tried. I expected awkwardness. I expected judgment. Instead, she glanced up, offered the softest almost smile, and returned to her plants like nothing had happened, like she hadn't caught me in my most vulnerable, embarrassing moment. For the next few days I walked around my own house like it was filled with invisible landmines. My son was getting better, the fever slowly fading, but the exhaustion stayed. Everything felt louder, the dripping faucet, the hum of the old refrigerator, the silence of the nights when I couldn't sleep. And every time I closed my eyes, her voice would return, not cruel, not playful, just hauntingly steady. "If you want to look, just ask." The strange thing was, she never avoided me. If anything, she seemed to show up more. Sometimes with food she claimed she'd made too much of, sometimes offering to help when she saw me struggling with groceries, sometimes simply waving from her porch with a gentleness that disarmed me. She didn't mention the incident once. Not once. But I could feel something shift, not between us but inside me. Something I didn't know how to name. I found out one evening, when she knocked on my door holding a small toolbox, saying she'd heard something rattling under my sink while she was passing by. I watched her kneel, watched her work, watched the way her fingers moved with experience and patience. And as she fixed the pipe, she spoke, not about me, but about herself. About losing her husband to a quiet illness that ate away at him faster than she could understand. About silence becoming louder after grief. About how loneliness sits in the room like a second shadow. She didn't say these things to make me feel better or to relate, she said them because she didn't want me to drown alone. She said them because somehow she understood the look in my eyes that night through the window wasn't desire. It was exhaustion. It was longing for something human. Something gentle. Something I had forgotten the shape of. Weeks passed, and little moments kept piling up. Her checking on my son when he coughed too hard. The warmth in her eyes when she noticed I hadn't shaved in days. The steady patience she offered when I felt the world sprinting too fast for a man already out of breath. And slowly, without either of us naming it, she became my quiet anchor. Not a lover. Not a fantasy. Not something forbidden. Just a presence that reminded me I wasn't disappearing, even on days I felt invisible. One late evening, I found her sitting on her porch wrapped in a shawl, staring at the sky as if searching for someone. I sat beside her without asking, and she didn't mind. We didn't speak at first. The silence felt safe. Then she said something that stayed with me forever, that people only freeze when they are afraid of being seen. That sometimes it's easier to look at life from behind windows instead of opening doors. And I realized then, she had never been addressing the moment through the blinds. She had been addressing the part of me I kept hidden, the part that refused help, refused softness, refused to be cared for because life had taught me that nothing stays. The truth is, I never asked to look. Not in the way she meant. But what I did ask, silently, unknowingly, was for someone to notice the cracks in me before I collapsed completely.